Cale Dravenmore had not smiled in 3 years. The people of Silvercrest knew this. His guards knew this. Even the wolves that ran the forest borders at night seemed to carry the same heaviness their king carried. Quiet, watchful, and never fully at rest. He was not a cruel man. He was simply a man who had lost something important and had decided, somewhere deep inside himself, that the world did not deserve to see him soft again. On the night everything changed, Cale was riding back from the eastern border alone. He had sent his guards ahead. He needed the silence. The winter air was sharp enough to cut skin, and the moon, full and pale, sat low in the sky like it was trying to get a closer look at the earth below. He was passing through the edge of Harrowmere, the human market town that bordered his territory, when his horse stopped without being asked. Cale looked down. In the narrow space between two closed market stalls, half hidden beneath a piece of torn canvas, was a girl. She was curled on her side with her knees pulled to her chest, her feet bare against the frozen stone ground. Her clothes were little more than rags. Her dark hair was tangled across her face. She was so still that for one terrible moment, Cale thought she was already gone. Then she shivered, a small, weak trembling that moved through her entire body. Cale was off his horse before he had made any conscious decision to move. He crouched beside her and touched 2 fingers to her neck. Her pulse was there, faint, slow, but present. Her lips were turning blue. Her skin was cold in a way that had nothing to do with the night air, and everything to do with how long she had been lying here, unnoticed, while the world moved around her. Something shifted inside him, not pity, something older and quieter than pity, something that felt almost like recognition, which made no sense at all, because he had never seen this girl in his life. He wrapped his heavy riding coat around her, and lifted her carefully. She weighed almost nothing. That fact landed somewhere in his chest and stayed there. He rode back to Silvercrest with her held against him, one arm keeping her steady, her head resting beneath his jaw. His wolf, the instinct and the creature that lived beneath his skin, was completely, unusually calm. She woke 2 days later. The room she opened her eyes in was larger than any space she had ever slept in. There were heavy curtains, a fire burning in a stone hearth, a bed so deep and warm she had forgotten what warmth felt like. For a long moment, she simply stared at the ceiling, too weak to feel afraid. Then she remembered the cold, the alley, the way darkness had started to feel like a kindness rather than a threat. She sat up too fast and immediately regretted it. Slowly, a woman's voice, calm and firm. A young attendant stepped forward from the corner of the room. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. Your body needs time." "Where am I?" she asked. Her own voice surprised her, rough, unused. "Silvercrest Manor. The Alpha King brought you in himself." The words meant very little to her. She did not know what an Alpha King was. She only knew that she was warm, and that her feet were bandaged, and that someone had put clean clothes on her while she slept. When Cale came to the doorway that evening, she was sitting up in bed with a bowl of soup she had already finished, looking at her hands, like she was reminding herself they belonged to her. He knocked on the open door. She looked up. He was not what she expected, though she could not have said what she expected. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and gray eyes that looked like they had seen too many winters. He was dressed plainly for someone who apparently owned this entire manor. "You're awake," he said. "Yes." She paused. "Thank you, for whatever you did. I brought you inside." He said it like it was nothing. She suspected it was not nothing. "What is your name?" She hesitated, not because she was hiding it, but because the question had a complicated answer. "Sera," she said finally. It was what she had called herself for the past 3 years. Whether it was her real name, she honestly could not say. Her memory before those 3 years was like trying to see through fog, shapes without edges, feelings without causes. "Sera," he repeated. He looked at her for a moment longer than was comfortable, then looked away. "You can stay until you're well." He left before she could respond. She stayed longer than either of them planned. It was not that she refused to leave. It was that every time she thought about leaving, she found a reason to stay one more day, one more hot meal, one more morning, watching the snow fall from a window that had glass in it. She had not seen glass windows in a very long time. Cale, for his part, did not push her to go. He told himself it was because she was not yet fully recovered. He told himself it was common decency. His wolf told him nothing. It simply became quieter and calmer every time Sera was somewhere nearby. They began to talk in the evenings, usually in the large sitting room off the main hall. It started by accident. Sera was reading a book she had found on a shelf, and Kale came in, without expecting anyone to be there. He sat down in the chair across from her, because leaving felt more awkward than staying. She looked up. He picked up his own book. Neither of them spoke for an hour. The following evening he came back. So did she. By the third evening, they were talking. Carefully at first. About small things. About the books on the shelves. About the snow outside. About nothing important. But small things add up. Small things, said consistently, across many quiet evenings, become something larger than they look. Kale noticed that she laughed very softly, like she had learned at some point to keep her joy small so it would not be taken from her. He noticed that she asked better questions than most people he knew. He noticed that she never asked him about power, or territory, or the things people usually wanted from him. Sera noticed that he listened when she spoke, fully, without planning his next words while she was still finishing hers. She noticed that he was careful with fragile things, which seemed strange for a man his size. She noticed that he was lonely, in the specific way of people who have decided not to be. She understood that kind of loneliness very well. It was Elder Morvain who saw it first. The old man arrived at the manor one gray morning under the pretense of routine counsel. He found Sera in the courtyard, feeding scraps of bread to birds that had gathered on the stone wall. She was talking to them quietly, which should have looked foolish, but somehow did not. Morvain stood at the courtyard entrance and watched her. Specifically, he watched the small mark on her collarbone, visible above the collar of her borrowed coat. It was faint, the shape of a crescent, silver as a fish scale. She covered it reflexively when she noticed people looking, as though she had learned it drew unwanted attention. Morvain went directly to his study. He opened a chest that had not been unlocked in 20 years. Inside was a sealed record, parchment and ribbon, and a sketch drawn by a royal artist 2 decades ago. His hands were steady, his heart was not. Kale's physician came to him privately one afternoon, with results from a routine health examination he had requested for Sera, wanting to confirm she had no lasting illness from her time in the cold. The physician placed the report on his desk and said quietly, "Her blood is unusual, my lord. There is a lunar signature in it. I have only ever read about this in old medical texts. It exists in one bloodline." He paused. A bloodline we believed was gone. Kale was quiet for a long time. "Leave this with me," he said. He went to Morvain. He already knew, from the expression on the old man's face, that the physician was correct. Morvain told him everything. 20 years ago, during the night of the blood eclipse, the Moon Queen had been killed and her infant daughter hidden among humans by a loyal servant. The child was supposed to have died shortly after. Everyone had believed it. No one had searched for her. But death and disappearance are not the same thing. Kale sat with this for a long time in the silence of Morvain's study. He thought about the girl in the sitting room who laughed quietly and talked to birds. He thought about how his wolf had gone calm the moment he found her. He thought about the sketch Morvain had shown him, a face so like Sera's that there was no reasonable argument against it. He went to tell her. She was at the window when he came in. The moon was just beginning to rise. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the light fall across her face, and he saw, for the first time clearly, what he had been registering without words for weeks. Her eyes, in the moonlight, were not simply dark. They held silver in them, deep and quiet, like light behind still water. He told her simply and directly, because he did not know another way to deliver something this large. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a very long time. "You think I am a princess," she said. "I think the evidence says so, yes." "I have been sleeping in alleys," she said, not with bitterness, with a kind of bewildered honesty. "For 3 years, I have eaten food from the ground." "I know." She turned away from him and looked out at the moon. He watched her shoulders rise and fall with a breath that was too steady to be entirely calm. He said nothing. He understood, without being told, that this was a moment she needed to move through at her own pace. When she turned back, her eyes were bright. Not with tears exactly, with something that had no clean name. Recognition, perhaps. Or grief. Or the very specific feeling of a door opening that you had stopped believing was there. She touched the crescent mark at her collarbone without thinking. I always covered it, she said quietly. People would look at it strangely. I thought it was just a birthmark. It is a birthmark, he said, just not an ordinary one. She looked at him. He looked back. For a moment, there was nothing complicated between them, just two people standing in a room that had become, without announcement, important. The danger came quickly after the truth did, as danger tends to do. Lord Cain Ashvale arrived at Silvercrest 3 days later. He was all polished manners and sharp eyes, the kind of man whose smiles never reached the upper half of his face. He was a rival alpha who had held more territory than he should, and wanted more than he had, and he had been searching, quietly, for the lost Moon Princess. Not to protect her, to remove her. The lunar throne, even empty, was a check on alpha power. With no heir to claim it, that check disappeared. Cain had spent years benefiting from its absence. He was not willing to watch that change. Cale kept Sera away from the formal meeting. He watched Cain's eyes move through the manor, like a man counting what was in a room. He said nothing of Sera. He was pleasant and careful, and revealed nothing. That night, a silver-tipped arrow came through Sera's window. It missed her, because she had moved to the far side of the room to get a glass of water, seconds before it struck. Cale was already in the corridor, already moving on the instinct his wolf had been shouting for an hour. He came through the door to find her pressed against the far wall, breathing hard, completely unharmed, staring at the arrow embedded in her pillow. He crossed the room in 4 steps, and stood between her and the window. She grabbed his arm, not to hold herself up, but to hold him in place. I'm fine, she said, firmly and immediately. I'm not hurt, I'm fine. He turned to look at her. He let out a breath that had clearly been held for too long. I know, he said. She did not let go of his arm. In the end, it was Sera who faced Cain. Not because Cale could not, but because she chose to, and the difference mattered enormously to her. She stood at the manor gates the following morning, with the lunar mark burning silver at her throat, visible and unapologetic for the first time in her memory. Morvain stood to her right. Cale stood to her left, not in front, not behind. The assembled pack witnesses watched in silence. Sera spoke clearly. She invoked the lunar accord, the oldest law in the supernatural world, older than any alpha title, which granted the Moon Princess authority to stand in judgment over any alpha found to be operating against the safety of the supernatural community. Cain had sent an assassin. That was not an allegation. The arrow was evidence. The assassin was in custody, and the chain between them led directly to Cain's household. He tried to argue. He tried to smile his way through it. Sera did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She simply waited until he finished, and then she continued, and the words she used were exact and unhurried, and left him no exit. Cain was stripped of his title before noon. That evening, they sat on the stone steps of the manor. The full moon was above the trees now, large and clear and white. The air was cold but not cruel. Sera had been offered the formal restoration of the lunar throne. She had not yet decided exactly what shape that would take, whether it would look the way it had before, or something new entirely. Either way, she knew what she would not do. She would not disappear again. She would not cover the mark. She would not make herself small so that other people felt larger. Whatever you choose, Cale said, Silvercrest stands with you. She looked at him from the corner of her eye. You say that like it costs you nothing. It costs me nothing, he said honestly. That is not the same as meaning nothing. She thought about that. It seemed true. She let it be true. The night was quiet around them. Somewhere in the trees, a wolf howled once, and then the forest was still. Sera leaned her head against Cale's shoulder. Not because she was tired, not because she needed to be held. She did it because she wanted to. And wanting things, choosing things, simply and freely, was still new enough to feel remarkable. He did not move. He did not make it a moment larger than it was. He simply stayed. And the man who had not smiled in 3 years felt something loosen quietly in his chest, like a knot that had simply been waiting for the right hands.